Elevate your game. Learn to process your deer with expert step-by-step guidance. With just your hands and a sharp knife, we'll show you how to break down every part of the deer and turn it into delicious meals for your kitchen.
Hey, I'm Cuz Strickland, and this is something that ain't a wild turkey. Y'all probably think I'm gonna be doing turkey processing. We're not. This is way closer to my heart. We got Darius Burnett and Hunter Goodson from Mississippi State. Darius, you're a muscle biologist and you run the meat lab. You cannot believe how much good Mossy Oak has gotten out of Mississippi State. They got us in the TV business. But what we're going to do today is we're going to show you, they're going to show you how to properly process a deer. I was watching these two sharpen their knives and it's like, I'm going to get a lot of good out of this. So guys, we got it broke down. Somebody got them a big nice doe yesterday. It's quartered up, hind quarter, front shoulder. Now I even know what that is. That's the back strap and that's the inside tenderloin. Where do we start? What's the best way to do it? Because y'all know the proper way. I don't call myself a butcher. I'm not going to use that verbiage. Mine is not that technical. So I'm anxious to see how you guys do it. So how do we properly start on which piece you're going to start and show us how to do that?
Absolutely. So yeah, thank you all for having us here today. We're excited to be here to show how we go about processing or fabricating a deer. And so myself and Hunter, as mentioned, work at Mississippi State University as part of the Animal and Dairy Science Department. We operate a USDA inspected meat processing facility there on campus. And so this is a little bit different than what we do on a typical basis because typically the animals arrive to us live and we go through the entire process of harvesting the animal and then letting it age and then fabricate. Today, this deer, as you mentioned, was harvested yesterday, arrived to us on ice. It's been quartered up, and so again, everybody has their own way of skinning a deer, and so we didn't want to go through that process today. We wanted to specifically talk about once you get the hide off, what do you do with the resultant meat? And so one thing I think the best place to start is we'll start on the shoulder on this particular deer. Reason being because that's where we were told where the shot, the actual shot came up or penetrated the deer. And so we want to make sure that we'll start there, remove any blood splash, any of the entry and exit wounds that are on that shoulder, and any lead or anything like that that may be detrimental to the consumer's health. And so we'll start there.
Yep, that's usually the part. If some people throw away and they're scared that there ain't much meat, that's kind of an unused piece sometimes, not at my house, but that's a great place to start right there.
All right, yeah, so there's definitely a lot of meat on there, but depending on how you dispatch the deer and you know where you shot it, in entry and exit wounds, it may be a little bit intimidating if you see blood splash or things like that, or if you see that you know there may be some potential lead. And so we'll start with the shoulder there. Hunter, if you want to flip it over. And so we've kind of laid the deer out as you would see it anatomically from front to back. And so obviously the front shoulder, our midsection here, the ribs are not included. Obviously there's not a whole lot of meat on those deer ribs. And then our big leg section here. And so Hunter can start with kind of trimming around where that shot entry and exit would have come in. And any, as he mentioned, you want to be careful for any broken bones or anything that might be in there, as well as any lead or shrapnel that also might be present.
Or a broadhead. If they get too far, that thing will stick in there. So I'm sure you guys have run into all that.
And just we talk, you know, we're going through the ABCs of fabrication, and when we teach the ABCs as well. I tell anybody you can be a meat scientist if you know anatomy, biology, and chemistry, right? So those are the ABCs. And so one of the things, again, where this animal was shot at, you're up right by the shoulder blade, and so depending on the strength of the bullet, the impact of the bullet, or the broadhead in this case, you can lead to shattering, you can lead to fracturing, you can lead to fragmentation. And so that's why it's very important to pay attention to where the bullet went in and out and process that portion of the carcass accordingly. So. Okay, so first what we'll do, since we're going to work with that shoulder, we're going to, again, keeping our food safety considerations in mind. We don't want to let this meat sit out too long, and so we're going to put this back on ice while we work on the shoulder. So. Yep. All right, so Hunter's gonna start working on this shoulder, and while he starts working on it, he'll show you where he's gonna separate it at. But one thing I wanna highlight is that, again, we have two types of muscles, broad categories. We have what we call locomotive muscles, and then we have stabilizing muscles. And so the muscles in the shoulder of the deer are going to be primarily locomotive muscles, meaning that they're using this muscle to get back and forth to their bedding spot, back and forth to the watering hole, running from coyotes or whatever they're doing. And so as a result, these muscles tend to be tougher. They tend to have more connective tissue because of the function of the muscle in the live animal. And so we'll let Hunter talk through the separation, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we would use these cuts of meat for.
Yeah, so like we said, we got the shoulder here. So what I've done, we have our scapular or shoulder blade portion. I've taken and divided our shank or arm portion off at that shoulder joint. As you see here, we got some blood splat from the bullet wound. So basically what we're going to try and do here is we want to trim this bloody membrane off to see what we got underneath. We want to work to remove as much of that blood splat, bone material, and see what's salvageable out of this shoulder section.
Now, when you broke it down, you just went around this joint?
Yes.
You didn't saw and all, you just went one cut.
So you can use those joints, so that's just a kind of a ball and socket joint there. So you can just find where that joint's at, use your knife to go around that membrane, and it'll come straight apart.
If you actually look on this one here, you can actually see it looks like the bullet actually did hit right there on that joint as well.
So we'll just clean this up, move some of these pieces out, just so we can see what we got.
And so while it may kind of look random, again, Hunter is using the anatomy of the animal as landmarks. And we actually have what we call the 5 principles of meat cutting that we use to guide us whenever we're cutting meat. And so those include separating thick cuts from thin cuts, separating fat from lean, separating more tender cuts from less tender cuts, separating more valuable cuts from less valuable cuts, and then also cutting perpendicular to the grain to make the meat more convenient and more consumable for the consumer.
So what I'm doing, this shank portion doesn't have much damage, so I'm just gonna take and debone this section a little bit to get the salvageable meat off of there before I focus on this shoulder blade portion. Again, just using the knife, we'll just follow that bone, and that muscle will come right off of there. So we've got same on this shank here.
So if you've ever been to a fancy restaurant, you may have seen them on the menu. They'll have lamb shanks, things like that. And so you could actually cook that shank in a similar manner. And so when Hunter pulls that off, I'll show you some of the connective tissue that's present in the shank. And so if you look at this connective tissue that's present in the shank, this connective tissue actually at about 165 degrees, it gelatinizes or basically turns into jello. And so you get a texture when you're eating these shanks that has a little bit of a sweet flavor. And so again, you can go to a fancy restaurant and they may charge you $20, $30 for a braised lamb shank on the table. And so you can do something very similar with the deer shank as well. And so there's a little bit more of that shank meat with the connective tissue that's present. And again, in beef cattle, in beef, you'll see cross-cut shanks, or they'll call it osabuco. And in lamb and goat, you'll see whole shanks, and again, similar in this muscle here.
Dave, when y'all are removing what a gunshot was.
Yes, sir.
How big you got a diameter you go around, or do you feel for bone chips or anything? You want to make sure.
Yeah, so we want to remove any obvious blood splash that we can remove from there, and then also again, you want to salvage as much as possible without compromising or jeopardizing somebody's health and the consumer. But it is more of a feel thing. You want to make sure, kind of again, depending on where it hit, it may have shattered a bone, it may have chipped off a bone, and so again, you got to kind of feel through in order to make sure you're getting all those remnants out.
It's a lot of feel and kind of visual. So y'all see on this the shoulder where that's chewed up, we're probably going to take that whole section off because there could be pieces of bone or bullet left in that muscle. Whereas the rest of that is really left unscathed from the bullet. So we'll be able to salvage the majority of that.
And you say that shank, which I'd say 99% of the people are gonna throw that in their pile for making ground beef. But you say once you cook it at that right temperature, it can get tender and it's got a good taste to it. Didn't know that.
Absolutely, yeah. Again, this is a delicacy in many cases. Like I said, you go to some fancy restaurants, or like I said, some fancy recipes include using the shank in particular. And like I said, it's because of, so deer, not to get too deep into weeds, but deer are what we call artiodactyl ungulates. So basically what that means is they're even-toed and they walk on their tippy toes.
Right.
And so essentially if you were to walk on your tippy toes all day, your calf muscles would be huge and they'd be very, very strong. Essentially the same thing is what's happening with these deer. They're walking on their two tippy toes all day. And so as a result, this muscle has a lot of connective tissue in there to allow them to articulate that and jump and do all those type of things. And so again, if you cook that at the right temperature and use moist cookery to cook it, again, that will turn into essentially jello. And so you think you're tasting fat. It has almost the flavor of fat or the texture of fat, but has a little bit of sweetness because of the glycoproteins and things that are present there. And so again, this is a delicacy that a lot of people would just throw into their sausage pile or their ground pile, but again, could make you a nice cut and a nice centerpiece on the plate.
That's interesting. I read a thing the other day, don't quote me on this, but it's true, that venison, ungulates, elk, all that, mule deer, whitetail, are just below, as far as health, as protein, just below wild-caught salmon. That's how good venison is. That's why people want to know. We used to do a thing at the QDMA called Field of Fork, and we would go set up at a farmer's market cooking venison, and people would come up, man, I want to taste that. And they all wanted to go hunting. And what was hanging them up was, what do I do after I get a deer down? This kind of stuff right here is just invaluable for people who want to know where their protein comes from.
Absolutely.
And you guys understand that better than anybody. I just learned me a neat trick. I'm going to be working on that in about a week.
Oh, yes, sir. Great cut of meat. And so we've kind of taken all the remaining muscles off of the shank portion, or the foreshank or arm portion of the, and so because we had to trim around some of the gun wound or the bullet wounds, it's a little bit distorted, but this could obviously enter into your sausage pile. You can also turn this into a roast, right? A bit of an arm roast, a boneless arm roast, and you can take this boneless arm roast, wrap some butcher tie around it, season it up, and you can cook that as a roast, and that would be low and slow. Put it in the crock pot, or however you cook your roast, and that's another way to cook some of these shoulder or these arm.
I'm assuming it's just like beef, low and slow. The longer, the more tender it's going to get. Yes. And I think some people who say they don't like wild game, I think number one, they didn't get it handled right in the field, and we already had that done, and they just don't cook it long enough, because man, that's special right there. I didn't know there were any roast in the front shoulder. I'm kind of waiting on that back hindquarter, because yes. I know y'all gonna tear that down right.
And so one of the things I talked about is cutting perpendicular to the grain. And so if you actually look at, and the other thing about understanding and having a good eating experience, so if you look at this, you'll see the muscle fibers in this are running this way, right? And so if I were to try to make this more tender and palatable, there's several things you can do. You can make a little pinwheel roast out of this, right? And stuff it with some cream cheese or whatever you want to do, tie it up and cook it that way. But then again, the principle of meat cutting says that we would cut this perpendicular to the grain. And so again, you can see the muscle fibers running that way. And so then to make the eating experience, I could give somebody this whole chunk of meat and they'd take a bite and they're gonna say that was tough. Or I can just take it, and if I cut it perpendicular to the grain and shorten those muscle fibers, right? Now they're gonna have a much better, now obviously if this was cooked, but they would have a much better eating experience eating a piece of meat that's been cut perpendicular
so
to
the grain's going like that, you cut the opposite way.
Absolutely.
Just like you're gonna take a brisket when you're done.
Yes.
Makes sense. Never thought about that on venison.
Yeah, so it's all the same, and those principles of meat cutting apply across species, whether we're doing chicken, turkey, beef, pork, goat, rabbit, all the same.
Against the grain.
Against the grain, yes sir.
So what I got here is that scapula or shoulder blade portion. I'm going to pull a couple cuts off of this, and because most people will put this into grind, but if it's undamaged, you can pull a couple cuts. So similar to like a flat iron beef steak, you can pull that top blade portion off of here, off the top side of that scapula. And this portion here, we'll remove this silver skin off, because that's not very tender in an eating experience.
And so you mentioned the flat iron, which is actually obviously a cut of beef, but actually through the University of Nebraska, they did what they call the bovine myology project, and they basically dissected and characterized every muscle on the beef carcass. And actually, they actually determined and discovered the flat iron steak, which used to get cut up in our chuck roast, right, or in our arm roast. And now that's actually the second most tender cut of beef on the entire carcass. And so right below the tenderloin, the flat iron. And so now they pull those out, because we used to sell it as part of the chuck roast for, $3.99 a pound or whatever the price of chuck roast is. Now they pull that the flat iron out and sell that flat iron for $11.99 a pound. So
That's what he's working on.
Yep, so this would be the top blade. Now, there is a vein of gristle, connective tissue that runs down the center. So similar to how you would fillet a fish, you can take and fillet that gristle out, and that's a really tender cut that can be consumed instead of it all going into your grind or your sausage.
So thinking about how to add additional steaks to your again, we don't. Most people if they go to the processor, take it home, they're going to basically have we'll get to the back straps and the tenderloin, and then everything else usually goes in the sausage grind pile, maybe a couple roasts. But again, this is a nice tender cut of meat that you can use. You can put it on a kebab stick. You can grill it really quickly on your grill. This is not something that you have to do low and slow, right? You want to grill this one here as opposed to doing low and slow on some of these roast and thicker cuts. The reason why the flat iron or the infraspinatus muscle is so tender because it's the equivalent of the rotator cuff muscle in a human being. And I tell people, we watched the World Series last night. You see baseball players all the time, they tear their rotator cuff. You've never seen a cow or a deer throw a baseball, right?
Yeah.
So they don't use that muscle very much, and so that's the reason why it's a very tender muscle.
That's fascinating stuff.
Yep, so that lays, so what we have, we clean the rest of this scapula up. The rest of this would go into your burger, your grind, the back portion. I'm just gonna clean this so we can show you where exactly I got that from.
Now the fat on a whitetail isn't like the fat on a beef cow. It's not necessarily very tasty. And so y'all do a pretty big job of trimming all that off, that sinew and that gristle and stuff, and you want it mostly lean, right?
Yes.
Well, guys, to me it looks like it's bigger now than it was when the whole shoulder was sticking out here, because you took those special cuts out, which I had no idea was in there. That was all ground beef pile for me right there. I didn't know all those cuts was in there, and that's just the front shoulder so far.
Yeah, that shoulder, again, it's one of those, the system of the shoulder is a very complex in the live animal, given that it has to help the animal get back and forth. And so there's different types of muscles in there. They have different functions. And so we don't want to just treat them all the same and throw them into the grind pile, because there are some nice delicacies that you can get out of the shoulder as we've demonstrated today.
Impressive. All right, guys, I'm gonna jump in there in the lead and say, let's do the back strap next, because that happens to be one I'm familiar with. I kind of know what it looks like and I know how to get it out, but I'm dying to see what it looks like when a pro gets through with it. So can we do the back strap?
Absolutely. We'll do the big one and the part. So here we have two back straps actually, and so the back straps are the longissimus muscle, and so this is kind of, a lot of times people just pull the back straps out and say you can do whatever you want to do with the rest of it. All I wanted was the back straps. Yeah. This one here is actually a partial back strap because of where the entry and exit wound went when they harvested this deer. Actually kind of bisected the back strap, and so again that is just a casualty of the hunt. But we'll go through and show how to clean this back strap up, and so this is essentially just the primal cut, or the entire back strap, and so we'll go through and actually clean it up. Hunter will show how we remove some of the silver skin, make it look nice and pretty like a fillet, and then also some of the accessory muscles that are associated with it.
Now, if this was a cow, that's what it would be. Would it be the fillet where you had this so much on the menu and all that, or would it be a?
This would actually be the longissimus muscle on the.
But what would you call it if you cut this out of a cow and put it on as a steak? What would that be? Would that be a fillet or a ribeye, or what would this be?
So in beef, if this was beef, this would actually be cut in half and much larger.
This would be a beef tenderloin.
Right. So
it would be the beef loin.
It would be the beef loin.
Right.
And then you would have your short loin, which would be your New York strips, and then the shoulder portion of that would be where your ribeyes come from.
Oh, okay.
So this would be essentially, if you were to take the entire, so we call it the longissimus muscle, and the first four letters are long, and it's literally a really long muscle, right? So, so if you look at your back, literally it goes from basically behind your shoulder blade all the way down to your rump. And so this is essentially the same muscle that you would see.
And you're right, a lot of people just give me the back straps, take the deer, and that's a shame. But my wife just sent me, I showed you a picture, she just sent me a picture of a beef tenderloin. It's $137. That's crazy. So I'm gonna pay close attention to this. I wanna get some secrets out of this. So
so we'll get it cleaned up.
Yeah, so basically how we'll begin, we'll take off what membrane's on top. We've got some remnants of ligament and silver skin here. There's a few different ways you can do that. We can go from the top with our knives and sort of fillet that off of there. Try not to get too much of the muscle with that.
So again, this is where you can kind of watch your yield. You want to make sure that you, again, don't take too much muscle in the industry where you're obviously doing beef or pork and other things. And so if you're doing thousands of those a day and you're taking off a couple pounds off of each one while you're trimming, then you can really hurt your yield. So that's important. In this case, we're really trying to increase the consumer's eating experience and convenience for them to prepare this cut of meat by removing that silver skin off of it.
Well, y'all certainly make it look easy. And that's a big deal. You don't want to leave any of that on there if you can, is that right?
No, because when you cook it, it'll get tough.
Tight.
So we try and remove as much of that as possible, and it's going to make that the best eating experience. So it's kind of a tedious task. Just take your time. A nice sharp knife really helps with getting that off of there.
Yeah, that's a labor of love. That's what we call it on my farm. That's the reward right there. So, holy cow. Y'all do make it look easy. You're pretty fast at that. It takes me a lot longer than that.
So we get that cleaned up. There's a few different, obviously a lot of people will cut this into basically chops or steak style, where you just take and cut slices across. You could also leave it whole, wrap it in bacon, cook it whole as a roast in the oven. It's pretty lean, especially in venison.
And so as we mentioned, in terms of this being a very long muscle, the muscle fibers actually run in this direction, right? And so
the length of the thing.
Right, and so it's kind of hard to see there, but you can actually see that. But then what we'll do, again, following our rules of meat cutting, so actually what he's showing here are the ends of the muscle fibers. So the muscle fibers are like straws, and you're basically seeing those muscle fibers. Yeah. And so again, even if you cook this whole, when you go to cut it, you're still going to cut it perpendicular to the grain. So you wouldn't cut it like this, obviously, right? Because now you're cutting along the length of the grain, and it's still going. So I can cook this same piece of meat, and if I cut it 2 different ways, you're going to have 2 different eating experiences. Same seasoning, the exact same piece of meat, but if I cut it long ways here, you're going to say that was the toughest thing I ever had. If I cut it short, cut it perpendicular to the grain, then you're gonna say that was.
Now look, that's the 3rd time he said that, so y'all pay attention. That's a big deal, cutting it perpendicular to the grain. I'm learning that. Hey, you know, if you want to get a giant argument started on the World Wide Web, throw your backstrap recipe up there, because that's the one thing everybody is an expert at, is cooking that backstrap. So I'm gonna try to get y'all to give us some hints on that when we get through showing how to properly fix one.
All right, so I've got this clean. I'm gonna demonstrate just cutting it.
That one's done. There's ready to be cut.
So it's whole. We can take and leave it as a roast style, or we can take and cut.
All right, let me ask you this. All this stuff right here, would you leave that in your scrap pile for hamburger or ground beef?
You wouldn't want to put this silver skin in there. It's just gonna be tough, and it really doesn't add any meat to your grind.
Gotcha.
So it'd probably be best if you left that out.
Left that out. Don't put that in your grind.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna cut a few cuts here.
So a lot of times, again, you can take those, put those right on the grill. I use my fingers to determine how thick my cuts are, because I know about how thick they are. So if I want a 2-inch, I'm gonna take it just a little bit side of there, and I bet you if you put a tape measure on there, that's 2 inches right there. So there's a 2-inch chop right there. These are about 1-inch chops there. And so again, or steaks, whatever you want to call them. But again, these, if you're gonna cook them as steaks, then obviously I just use Dalmatian seasoning, salt and pepper on them, and then put them on the grill. But you want to watch your grill, because you don't want these, they don't have a lot of fat in there. So if you look at intramuscular fat on a beef cow, you're looking for prime or choice, and you'll see, that marbling in there. There's not a lot of intramuscular fat in there. So a lot of people will put a little olive oil or something on there to help with the sear, but then salt and pepper, put them on the grill, and they'll be ready in just a few minutes.
Now, are you a medium rare guy on venison, or you cook yours done, or what's just your thoughts, personal opinion?
I'm medium
rare guy, especially on the backstrap.
On my steaks, If it's now ground meat, I always cook it to 165 regardless.
At least.
Yeah, but on my intact whole meat cuts or whole muscle cuts, I'm typically medium rare.
Now, is that something you would cook slower to make it tender, or are you just gonna cook that like you would a steak?
I'd cook it like a steak, unless I was cooking the whole roast. Then if I'm cooking the whole roast, then you want to be a little bit, the loin roast, and you want to be, depending on how you want to cook it. I've seen people do sous vide, where they put this whole thing in a bag, put their seasonings, everything in it, and they'll cook it that way, and that helps to preserve some of the moisture, because again, they don't have a whole lot of fat and things like that in there that will lead to that juiciness. So they sous vide them, and then they'll either grill them at the end or at the beginning. So some people do the sear, put them in a sous vide bag, and cook them the rest of the way. Some people will put them in the sous vide, cook them, then take them off and put a little bit of sear just to get the caramelization on that.
Yeah, I've never seen people sous vide at the hunting camp, but everybody's got their own recipe, and it depends on where you're from, the south and north and all that kind of stuff. And I know in pork they have a money muscle. To me, that's the money muscle right there. That's just solid gold right there. And y'all did that very quick, but I like this thickness that Hunter did right there. I'm not a medium rare kind of guy, but if you cook your deer meat more than medium rare, you're gonna get some hate on your post if you show it, because they say that's the key.
Yes, sir.
All right, y'all made that look like artwork. It's 2-inch versus 1-inch. You got all the silver skin out. Don't put that in your grind pile, because it's too tough. Now, what I want to ask you is, it depends on who you're talking to and what part of the country you're in. Some people get the tenderloin and the backstrap confused. They'll call all that the tenderloin, and some people don't even get the tenderloin out. People overlook that all the time. I used to have an old guy, he would tell every new member that came out to the hunting club, he said, no, you don't want that, that's the scent gland. He said, that's the worst piece of thing in there, and they would just go around and go somewhere else. And that is the most cherished part of the deer. You want to do that next?
Yes, sir. We'll go ahead and do the tenderloin next. And so again, A lot of times, the reason why people call the back strap or the loin muscle the tenderloin is because if you actually look at it, it actually kind of resembles, and it's almost the shape and size of a beef tenderloin, and so that's what they're more familiar with.
Yeah.
This is actually the muscle that's on top of the tenderloin or on top of the transverse process. That's the loin muscle. The tenderloin in a deer is going to be much, much smaller, right? And so here is the deer tenderloin, much smaller than what you would obviously think in a beef animal, and it's much smaller than the back strap. And so we have the tenderloin here, very small muscle, but very tender muscle. And so what we'll do is just trim it up like we did our other muscles. We're going to take off the accessory muscles that are associated with it, right? And so on the beef animal, we would call that the chain muscle. And so you would pull that chain muscle off of there, and then there's a little bit of KPH or visceral fat that's located with that, and so you want to pull that off as well. And so essentially, there's not much to fabricating the tenderloin. It's not a very big muscle again, but you can see the direction of the muscle fibers in the tenderloin as well. And so after we cook that, again, we would cut it perpendicular to the grain to have that eating experience for the consumer.
And when the deer's hanging up and it's opened up, the cavity's opened up, these are on the inside.
Yes.
Versus the back straps right on the backside. That sounds elementary, but some people miss that. I've seen it. You can go to a deer processor and people miss that all the time.
And depending on, because I mentioned that deer, like other ruminants, small ruminants, put on a lot of their fat internally, and so we call this KPH fat, kidney, pelvic, and heart fat. And so depending on how much is there, this fat may actually cover up the tenderloin, and you might not actually even see it. And so you have to actually pull that layer of fat off of the tenderloin to even get to the tenderloin. And so a lot of people don't realize that it's there, and it's a small muscle, but again, to your point, this is the creme de la creme when it comes to deer meat.
And don't let some old timer tell you that's the scent gland, because it's not. You could just wrap that in bacon and do your thing, and that's as good as it gets right there.
There's not too much cutting that I would do to it just because it's so small. I would treat it as one big whole steak or roast and go to town with it. Then we'd save that chain meat as well. That is eligible for our grind pile, so we would save that as well.
This is kind of the gold everybody understands. Y'all explained the back strap, 2-inch cuts, 1-inch cuts, and all that. And then the creme de la creme, the inside tenderloin, which is not a scent gland, but that right there is kind of the gold. But there's probably actually way more cuts and way more to talk about in that hindquarter, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've kind of went through and we processed what we call the middle meats, and so in the beef animal and the pig, and this is where the money is made at, right? This is where it's only about 11% or so of the carcass, but it accounts for about 40% of the carcass value in a beef animal, and that's because these are again are stabilizing muscles. They help to flex the spinal column and things like that, but they don't do a whole lot of locomotion, and so as a result, they're very tender cuts of meat. And again, these are the most cherished cuts. If you ask any deer hunter or anybody who prepares deer meat, this is some of the most cherished meat.
Well, y'all make them look cherished, I can promise you that. But with that said, I want to get that hindquarter out, because I'm going to get my phone recorded this so I can watch how the pros take all those muscles, because I know that's where most of the roasts and stuff are. Everybody's got a crock pot. That's what we need to look at next, is that hindquarter.
Yes, sir.
All right, guys, here's the deal. I've been deer hunting my whole life, and we put up a lot of deer meat. But on that hindquarter, if I ever get anything out of it that kind of looks like a roast, it was luck. There is no method to my madness, so I want to see how this roast comes out, where it comes from, how you get to it, because mine don't look as clean when I get through. I ended up putting way more in the grind pile, so let's do that hindquarter.
Absolutely.
Lots of information in there.
Both of them.
Yeah.
And in my estimation, that was a nice sized doe somebody donated for this video project. Good gracious.
Yeah, she's got some very nice sized muscles, and so this will be good for demonstration purposes. Again, as I mentioned, the locomotive and supportive muscles, a lot of the muscles in the hindquarter are going to be locomotive muscles. These are the ones that are helping them jump your 6-foot high fence and all those other things. They're using these muscles in the hindquarter in order to do that. And so we've got two different kind of setups here, and so one of these are from two different deer, and so in one case we basically separated it right at the pelvis, and so the pelvis is still included in this one, and in this one basically we disjointed it right there in that ball and socket joint there. And so just showing two kind of different scenarios and setups. Fabrication is relatively similar in both cases, and so we'll go through and talk about the individual muscles and how we fabricate those, and kind of orient ourselves to the leg or the hindquarter. And so what you see here is we have them both flipped up. This is how they would lay on the table, and so we consider this the bottom of the leg, and then this would be the top, and that becomes important when we're starting to name some of these roasts. And so you want to start where you want to start on the.
We'll start with the top.
Yeah.
So first set of muscles I'm going to take off. So you really have a top of round, an eye round, and then a bottom as kind of the major ones here. So we'll start. Y'all can see on these that it's really easy. You can see the seams of those muscles. So we're just going to follow those seams and remove that whole muscle group.
And you call that like the round or the top round?
Yep, so this would be equivalent to the top round, yes sir. So
now, when you took it apart right there, when they did, was it like the front shoulder? You just cut around?
yeah.
You can just,
so that's a ball and socket.
With a knife?
Yep, so you can do all that with a knife. You don't have to have a handsaw. So this one represents doing it with a knife, but if you had a handsaw, you could just saw those parts.
Okay. But the first one you're taking out is kind of the top round.
Yes, so I'm working on getting that out. You'll see it'll, when I get this taken.
And so again, Hunter's using the seams and the anatomy of the hindquarter itself in order to get these cuts out. And so literally, each one of these muscles is surrounded by a layer of connective tissue. We call it the epimysium. And so this surrounds and separates individual muscles. And so you're literally just following that seam of connective tissue and just using your knife to barely prick at it, and that essentially pulls that muscle completely off.
Yep,
And so now you have a whole roast.
He kind of just tore it out towards the end.
Right.
Yeah, so really the only point you're using your knife is to establish where that seam is. The rest you can really pull off by hand. Mm-hmm. So your top round, it sits right there on the top side or the inside of that round. Next one we'll remove is the eye round. So it's a long circular muscle here, similar. We're going to start at the top with that seam.
And that's what's in the grocery store. They call it the eye of the round roast.
Yep.
Just a little smaller.
Muscle, just a little bit smaller.
And so we can take that muscle, the eye around roast or eye around steaks come from this as well. And again, I keep going back to the length or the direction of the muscle fibers. These fibers go, again, so if it was on the animal, it'll go up and down, but in this case, they're going side to side. And so when we cut those eye around roasts, we're gonna cut them perpendicular to the grain, or cut them perpendicular to the grain to cut them into steaks. And so this is called the semitendinosus muscle in the live animal.
So now I'm gonna flip this leg over, and we're gonna take our bottom round or outside round off. Again, there's a seam here, so we're just gonna come around that, and that whole muscle will pull out just like that top round did.
And that's the bottom round?
That would be your bottom, yep.
Is that the biggest cut coming out of there, or is the top usually the biggest? Or are they about the same?
They're relatively the same. They do have a little bit different structure.
And basically you can trim this up and put it in a crock pot, spice it like you want to, and slow cook it, and that's a roast.
That's a roast.
Yeah.
Yep, and there's a few different, we can take that and we might demonstrate cutting it for jerky, whole muscle jerky as well.
A lot of people do that.
But
That's mine never quite looks like that, but I'm learning something. So.
So there's our bottom round.
Top round, bottom round,
and eye round.
eye round.
Yep.
That's it.
So we got a couple things left. We got basically what would be a sirloin tip or ball tip here. It lays on the front, so we have basically our knee joint there, and it lays on the front side of this bone. Get that off of there. And there would be a whole roast as well. So another whole roast. Got some accessory here. This is part of, do you want to show it on yours, or this is the cap?
Yeah, you can show them the cap.
So this is what's left, being that it was taken off at the joint. This is a little bit smaller, but that is essentially what would be compared to a sirloin cap. So it's a really tender cut. You could cook this similar to how you would cook the back strap as a steak wise as well. Like I said, finding those seams is really key. You see, there's not a lot of cutting that I'm doing. I'm more doing pulling those muscles apart. What I'm doing here is I'm separating this bottom shank off. So similar to what we showed on that shoulder, this could be cooked the same way.
Yeah, Dare said that the shank we pulled off the front shoulder is kind of a delicacy. Are these the same way?
Yep, so it's the same muscle, not same muscle, but same style. So it's got the same connective tissues, similar, so it could be cooked pretty much the same method. You can take that, debone it, or we can leave the bone in there and cook the whole shank.
Really?
Like that. So they're sort of broken into the major muscle groups. So
that's pretty amazing. I thought that would be a long, drawn-out process, and that just went by real fast, and you got all of them laid out there perfect. Man, that makes me want to cook. Top, that's the top.
That's your top,
Bottom,
and your eye.
and your eye around.
Yes, sir.
And when you put it in terms like that, I can understand it. It makes more sense to me. So I'll be trying to do that in my grandsons. They'll ask me, well, what piece is that? That's a roast. That's a pot roast. That's what I'll tell them. So I sometimes I have trouble getting the right carve out of there, but I'm learning from you guys. Again, you make it look easy.
I did have the cutting board is moving on me a little bit, but basically I boned out this entire leg essentially, and
in a couple of minutes.
And you can turn this into a roast itself, so put some string around it. Or what we tend to do, what I like to do, is I'll take this boneless, instead of me trying to take and cut up a bunch of different little strips of muscle like this to make jerky, I'll take my entire leg here and I'll either roll it over, cut that out of there, I'll either roll it over and then just put it in the freezer, let it stiffen up a little bit, or you can even lay it flat, but then I'll take that and run it across my slicer, and so now I'm cutting up whole muscles into my jerky cuts. And so that makes it 10 times easier than trying to put together a bunch of scraps or to try to individually cut big chunks of meat into the thin jerky slices. Just take, if I'm planning on doing that for my whole shoulder, or my whole leg, I'll take it, just let it stiffen up enough, and then run it across the slicer.
Now, is it always easier when you're processing, where you're gonna, run your grind through? Is it always easier when the venison is really cold? It seems to handle better, doesn't it?
The meat handles a lot better. One of my old colleagues, James Cannon, he used to talk about wormy meat or squirmy meat. And so when it's warm, we actually do some research for some major companies where we'll actually do what they call hot boning for sausage. And so right after we harvest the animal, we'll bone it out for sausage. But that's a lot harder process than dealing with meat that's been properly chilled.
Yeah, it's cold is good. I don't like processing when it's hot, but I know the grind works better. I'm pretty good at grind because I don't know how to get it to this stage. Now I may not. Now I'm probably gonna put some roast up this year watching you guys. Temp's a big deal. You know, a lot of people hang their deer, and we don't get that many freezing cold days down here in Mississippi. Is there a magic number, guys, for don't let it get above this, or can it get too cold or too warm? Is there a magic number in there?
So our food safety, what we call the danger zone, is between 40 and 140 degrees.
Anything
Celsius.
above 40,
Yeah, so basically your refrigerator is at about 4 degrees, and so that's basically where you want to have those refrigerated temperatures. Bacteria, E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, they like to hang, well, Listeria can hang out in the refrigerator too, but most of the bacteria, foodborne pathogens hang out between 40 and 140 degrees. And so when we are processing, we wash the carcass off. Typically we use hot water, and I encourage people to if they have that available, but if not, you definitely want to wash off the carcass and then get it into a chilled temperature as quick as possible, because that reduces the chance of the bacteria don't like to hang out at those cold temperatures, and so that reduces the chance that they start to grow and take off. So
now, for those of us who don't have a walk-in cooler, you know, that they can regulate, if you I have two big, the way I do mine, I have two giant big ice chests, and I'll put a layer of ice down, put that meat, maybe another layer of ice. Anything wrong with that as long as it stays way down there below 40 degrees?
yeah, ice is cold. Ice is 32, so yeah, as long as you can keep it on ice, then you're doing great. So.
Well,
The only thing with ice is make sure you drain the water off.
Yeah.
You don't want the meat sitting in water, so just make sure you drain it as that ice is melting.
So one of the things you'll see as it sits in water longer and longer is you'll start to see this portion right here was exposed to water, so it starts to gray out a little bit, and that's just the leaching of the myoglobin out of the muscles. And so myoglobin is the pigment that makes your muscles red. And
so it's not an issue.
No,
as far as safety, if some of your ice melts and and it starts turning, I ain't gonna say gray, but it loses that deep maroon color. But that's not an issue, is it?
That's more of an appearance and quality thing, but I would prefer you to keep it on ice, even if there is some water in there, than to keep it out of ice. So gotcha. I would err on the side of safety over, the appearance and quality.
Good tip. I can't believe, again, how much meat can be wasted when you don't properly trim it off that bone. It looks so much bigger when it's laying out than the whole hindquarter is this big now, it's covering the whole counter. That's pretty amazing. And neither one of you use your whole knife a lot. Once you got that seam going, you just pull it apart. So it ain't rocket science.
Nope.
The more you do it, the better you're gonna get
For sure, practice makes it look a lot easier, but really, and venison, deer are so lean, you can really see those seams pretty well. So just find a seam and you can pull that whole muscle group out.
And so, yeah, and then what's left is some bones there. Like I said, we can cut that shank off of there and have another shank to have another little gourmet shank there. There's a little bit of muscle around this pelvic here that we need to get out of there. But other than that, you got a little bit of meat for sausage, and either, again, talking about what's good for grilling, what's good for stews and roast and things like that. Again, depending on how you cut these, any one of these top round, you've seen top round steaks, you've seen eye round steaks, all of those in the store. That can either be a round roast all together, or I can put those on the grill as a round steak. All right, because I've cut them against the grain, which is very clear on this muscle here. All right, and so you can see I've shortened the straws, so to speak, and now that muscle is ready to put on the grill if I wanted to grill it.
Well, it even looks better when y'all do it. I'm telling you, it really does. That's pretty amazing. I can see I'm gonna have an issue now. My grind pile's not gonna be as big, and we eat a lot of ground venison. That's a treat right there. But it certainly makes sense to watch you do that in person. That's pretty impressive right there. Well, y'all said you're going to donate this meat. I hate to see it leave because I could roll that up in the back of my truck and I'd be busy this afternoon. But like I said, I've said this every time y'all cut up something, it looks way bigger when you get done than it does laying there. And it's amazing to see how easy and quick that was. I thought it was going to take a long time. Boom, y'all flew through that quicker than you did that front shoulder. But that hindquarter, there's a lot of different kind of cuts in there. And those roasts, you can cook them a lot of different ways. I can already pick up that he knows how to do all that low and slow cooking. I'm gonna get his cell phone when we get out of there. I'm gonna steal some recipes, but that wasn't anywhere near as difficult as I thought it would be to watch it done right.
Yeah, Hunter, you want to tell them what you did over here?
Yeah, so from that leg that I was working on, we pulled out basically 4 major muscles from that leg. So we got our top round, which is the inside portion of that leg. That muscle sits right on here. Then we got our eye round, bottom round, and then our sirloin tip or knuckle there as roast. And then we got our shank here, which you could obviously put into your burger or grind, or you could keep that whole and cook it similar to how you would lamb or goat shank. And then we got our cap here. So that actually sits, that's a muscle that lays right here on that round. So your sirloin area there, it's real tender. You can cook that similar to your back strap as a steak.
And so, cut it against the grain.
Yep. So like we've mentioned over and over, perpendicular, so that makes it a more tender.
Well, once y'all showed which way the grain's run, it's easy to see.
Yes.
Nobody's ever showed me that, but that's a big tip to walk away with right there.
And so on this side, this is just another whole hindquarter. And basically what we did is just completely deboned it, took all the bones out, and then left these in larger cuts. This could obviously go into our grind pile, or as I mentioned, we can stiffen this up in the freezer just briefly, get it just stiff enough where it's not frozen solid, and then use that to slice our pieces for our jerky, or if we wanted to make snack sticks and things like that, that can come from our grind pile. And then also again, that shank, which like I said, and on the rear shank actually has a lot more meat on it, hind shank, but this is again a delicacy that I think most people go through too much time trying to bone it out when you can just put it in and cook it as a whole muscle cut, or cook it as a whole shank, and experience that connective tissue and all that as well.
Well, I'll tell you this, you're very good at it. Not a lot of stuff out here, and I told them again, I go all over the place, I really do. And I'm constantly bragging about Mississippi State, our Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks. Until you go to those other places, you don't realize how good this area is for whitetail knowledge, and good for them for doing that. And they're kind of the first in a lot of stuff, talking about, hey, we need to harvest more does because people have gotten into, oh, I'm not going to shoot one that's that big. I'm like, dude, don't you eat deer meat? Are you kidding me? But this helps. And watching it made simple helps. So thank you guys for doing that.
Well, I think part of it, and the goal, I think, is to make this process less intimidating.
Right.
This is a process that anybody, again, with a sharp knife can do. And so again, we want folks to go out and shoot an extra doe, to fill up the freezer, and things like that, and obviously not to put any of the processors out of business, but some of this stuff can be done at home, and so we just want to encourage people and provide them with the tool set that, again, it takes a good sharp knife and then a little bit of practice, and again, you're not going to kill it again. It's already dead, so I would say just keep on cutting. So.
Well, here's an idea for the lab over at Mississippi State. Y'all need to do a T-shirt that says "Be a Meathead." Put a big old doe on the front of it. I'll buy the first one.
Yes, sir.
But I appreciate y'all doing that. It makes a lot more sense to me now. If I can figure that knife sharpening thing out, I'm gonna be a meathead this fall. Thank you guys.
Absolutely.